Chapter 10, Supporting Families of Children with Special Needs. Maybe the forefront of your responsibility as a teacher in working with families and children. Kids with special needs create unique needs for families also. And I think Dr. Rojas does a nice job of going a little bit in depth to this. So first, let's take a look at the objectives here of this. First of all, the historical events of special ed, which are pretty well laid out, and then legislation, government involvement, and then different special needs, including the different disabilities and giftedness. And some of this you've had again, but it'll be a kind of a flyover. And then resources that help families, and then your strategies to have better family-school partnerships. And that's the jargon that we use to talk about working with families is family-school partnerships. And in education, those aren't family words, those are teacher words. And so if I were you working with families, I'd use family words instead of family-school partnerships. I'd say working together, how can we work together, type things. And we're always guilty of that in education. I call it, you've heard me say it before, teacher speak instead of parent speak. So let's look a little bit at how this is laid out, how Dr. Rojas does this. First, here's this historical perspectives, and then legislation, and then this IDEA, and with a new term, IDIA, Individual with Disability Education Act, and it goes through a different. It doesn't do a good enough job at looking at the different ones. And then definitions. First, they break this one off first, kind of this fast-growing one, and then a brief look at all these different ones. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on those. I'm going to ask you to do some of that. And then these resources. And we go fly. And then here's the family-school partnerships are your avenues to work with families, all families, but especially kids families that have special needs kids. And it gets down in here. This is interesting about even finding out that your child has a disability, and then it goes through that. So let's take a look here. First of all, the historical perspectives, and obviously we don't have a great track record. Many tales of cruel and inhumane treatment of people with special needs. And we have this thing that I will call presentism, that we look back and not very proud of it, but there have been some really cultural shifts away from this. We didn't know any better, but we want to go back and say, oh, these were cruel and inhumane people taking care of these kids. They didn't know. They didn't know about this, and so I get really irritated how we look at things in our culture. We look back and say, oh, bad people, and it wasn't that way at all. It was the culture of the time, and now we know better. And what we didn't know, that we know now, that these people can thrive in the right environment. So it's been a revelation in special ed and special needs people, how they can survive, and it depends on folks like you working in the schools. Like here, the temples built by Alexander the Great was for asylum for mentally ill people. Lots of things here. Here's another one, belief in demoniology, that they had demons in them is what caused that. And then it come along here about 1700, Mark Gaspard Itterud was the first one to start doing some work with it. And so I took this in here like this, endured many difficulties across time. And I say presentism says, oh, those were bad people taking care of them. No, they didn't know. And then they were defended across time by these different people. And then here was, they thought it was demonology or superstition. And then people came along that saw it differently. And so I'm going to ask you, for number one here is you address these four to start with and what their role was. And let me just show you what that is here. Here is Gallaudet. And anytime you hear that word Gallaudet, you know that it means something to do with hearing impaired people. And so it gives you a little history of this. And then Perkins School for the Blind is first addressed actual schools to serve kids that were blind. And Gallaudet led on to Gallaudet College, which of course exists today. Is the only college in the country that is for exclusively serve kids with hearing impaired. And like so many, the number of kids with hearing impairments has shrank so far, and so many of them are included in regular colleges now that this is way smaller than it was at one time. And then in Easter Seals was about this guy, Edgar Allan, and he's a businessman that lost his son in a streetcar accident in 1907, a very well-known story. And what he did went on to start. And here's this first one I'm going to give you, the story of Easter Seals, and this is Edgar Allan. So let me pop this up. Uh-oh. This one isn't going to work, it doesn't look like. Let me take a look at this. So here I've linked it now here, if this isn't the correct one. And what it does, it introduces you to this young man. He's an Easter Seals ambassador. And I'm just going to ask you to give a little summary of what happened here with number one, as well as these folks here. Let's look at a few more here. The Joe Kennedy Jr. Foundation. I don't have that one up there, but you read about what he did. Here's Eunice Kennedy, and this is her thing. And again, this Kennedy, that is from the Kennedys that were the president. President Kennedy was elected in 1966 and was assassinated in 1963. This is his family because they had a sister that was special, and so here I've linked these. I'm going to ask you to visit all of these also. This will be number 2, and again, just a brief, these are all really short 1 or 2 minute videos, and I also want you to talk about what these contributions were in that, and they're right here. And this is the one on Special Olympics, is pretty good. Here's the one on ARC, change from ARC for people with intellectual development disabilities. There's a question on the test about that, so make sure you get that. Here's Bob and Suzanne Wright, Autism Speaks in 2005, and what they did. And here's a video about them. And a lot of you have heard of Autism Speaks. You know, it's just an epidemic in our culture. I can't believe there is an outcry about this racing number of kids with autism, and of course presents some unique challenges in schools that we haven't seen, that more now than we did even 10 years ago. So you address those. Here's another one. This is on Morgan's Wonderland here, and you view that quickly and give a little synopsis of what that is. So that'll be the historical perspective, and it's really a beauty for you and for me that how some of these families and people have stepped up. Other than the government is usually where we go to anything, and here is all examples of people making the difference, not government. So here's legislation, and let me take you on a little journey of legislation of people. This was a big one. It was called the Voc Rehab Act of 73, Section 504, and it takes you through what that's about. It gave us IDEA was the beginning of that. Considered disabled under the definition of 504 is this: has a physical or mental impairment that substantially, and here's the thing that you always got to know, substantially limits one or more of a person's major life activities, and has a record of these impairments. In other words, it can't be temporary, and is regarded as having such an impairment. So that's kind of the 3 things you look at to determine if somebody's eligible for a 504 plan. Here's what major life activities are, and those types of things. That's where that started. So here, the first was the Rehab Act of this. So again, I'm going to ask you to make one statement about each of these so that I know that you know a little bit what these are. And then the next came along was this one of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and that was a huge piece of legislation here of 1990, and make sure you put that in there. Were designed as public accommodations. And this, so read this. Types of intentional and unintentional exclusions is what this made illegal. So again, a question on the test about it. It's not only intentional torts, but unintentional exclusions also, is where 504 came from. And it looked at architectural and transportation barriers. It tried to look at all the things, and that's why it's had to be updated so many times across the spectrum. Is this American Day? It was a huge, it was equated in 1990, it was equated to the Civil Rights Act on President Johnson's watch back in '64, because it was now freeing another group of people. And this was 1990, and that's why I say it goes back to our history with these folks is not always the greatest, but it's presentism. As we moved on, we understood the wrongs and we righted them. And so when I see people get all uptight and all funny about these things, say, hey, we're doing the best we can, the best we could with what we knew at the time. And I'd ask you to see it through those eyes. Okay, and then the next one is more coming, this 94-142, the Education for Handicapped Children Act of 75, right here. And this was probably the next greatest piece. This was, we said, was 1990, but this one was a school one, two different things. This one different than school in 94-142. And what I want you to tell me in number 3 here is, what does that stand for? What does the 94 stand for? What does the 142 stand for? Okay. But let me talk a little bit about that here. I'm going to give you this video also with 94-142. And I'm not sure if I have that linked yet. I will link that in here. And I'll show you what it looks like. Oh, we got another one here that isn't quite right. So here, now I've linked it here for you. So now you tell me what this stands for. You take a look at this video also, and it gives you a nice little history lesson on 94-142. Let's go back here and look at 98 and 199. From 1983, so and here's 99-457, and there's questions on the test about both of these. This extended physical authorization for federal and state aids to local school systems, improved reporting information. That was their big thing. Here, infants and toddlers with disabilities, and you're in my era now. When I was witness to this, worked at a place when we started a program for kids, and so you will come down through those, and you'll have an idea of this. And then we're going to this IDIA, and here Individual Education Program. This is what it stands for, Disability Education Act Amendments. That's what these were with the extra I in here. And so let's just take a look at that. And this was an update, 105-17 and 108-446 for both reauthorization. So first it was known in 94-142 Education Act, and then it went on to get a new name, IDEA. And then Part C came along, and then these terms in the Act include the following, like what is a handicapped child, and those types of things. And here is that where we got this extra I in here, improvement. So if you need to know that, that's where that came from, improvement. It was the feds getting involved. And so let's go look at this. I want you to write that first of here, and I'm going to give you these for number 4 when you're going to write a little bit about each of these. First of all, you tell me that's Improvement Act, and then what about this? In parents' rights, you did something with that already. And the biggest thing, I want to just see basically what they say about parents' rights here. here was the improvement of this here. These 10 things here, you want to add those. Meeting agendas, okay. Here's the IEP stuff. Can I just give you this one too, if I can get this one to work? What do you know? So this is about what is an IEP.
Hi, I'm Laura.
And so what you want to do is, this might be something for you to put on your website also going forward so that you can explain it. And I'm going to show you how I'm going to give this to you. I'm going to connect here because I know you all don't, some of you have a book that doesn't allow you to click on this, so that's what I do. I simply, you've seen me do this before, I tell it to insert a link, I drop it here, and I tell it to save, and then it shows up over here for you. See, and you can take a look at that, and again, maybe take that with you forward. Let's go back here and see what else there was about this. And here it gives you a little sample of an IEP here. A couple different figures here that may be helpful. And then here's rights and responsibility of the parents. And I'm going to clip this to also give you, and you've seen me do this a number of times, that you can put this in your notes, but I also want this on your website. And I'm going to say Chapter 10, Parents' Rights. Okay. So it's like this: public agencies must notify the parents. They have the right to inspect all these things. So anytime you want to tell parents about their rights, there's a summation of it. Here's the big thing I tell you is, you've heard me say before, is they have the right to disagree. So please, let's say that. Let's put this in your notes and on your website, both. And if you'll paste them right here under Parents' Rights and Responsibilities 04, that would be enough, and then also on your website. So let's look at notification, mediation, developmental delay, charter schools. They're all quite simple here, and you will just bring that in so you have that. Okay. And then special needs of this ADD, ADHD, and you've heard this, so these are two things here: ADD, attention deficit disorder, but it could be ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity order. And let's take a quick look at that, what those are. And it kind of jumps here. Normal circumstance, emotional disturbance. Oh, it jumps clear down here. And it gives you a little thing about this. Let's clip this also, and put it in your notes and on your website. So I will do that for you. Chapter 10. What is it? I'm going to say 10.2, ADHD symptoms. Okay, and again, I say please stick this in your notes and on your website. It does a pretty nice job talking about it in attention, symptoms if they have hyperactivity, both here, and keep this handy. And this, none of this is rocket science to you. If you've worked with kids at all, you get this, what those things are about. Okay, and then here's a video also on it, just this classroom strategies for this. And here's what I want you to do with this, if you would. You don't have to write anything about it here, but what I would like you to do is, again, link this so you have it in your notes. Because once yours and my time together is up, you may not be able to find these exactly how you want them. So I'm going to ask you to link that in here onto your website also. And like I say, now we come back here. Okay, and there it is. All right, and now let's go on to these here of these different ones, and this will be great for you. You know what? We're not done looking at this here. Definitions of special needs and giftedness, and this is on the test. That's why I marked this one here. Is what is emotional disturbance, and that is inappropriate types of behavior and feelings under normal circumstances. Okay, that's what emotional disturbance is. Learning disabilities, visual impairments. Okay, this is going to be a little different. I'm going to, with these from the textbook, I'm just going to give you these, but I want you to have these definitions. So I'm going to ask you to backtrack a little bit. Back here, I've linked it in here. Looks like this. Takes you to my Google site, and here they are. And I want you to copy and paste these on your, and make a link on yours that says the same thing of definition of special needs and gifted. So when I look at your chapter 10 notes on your webpage, you have this. Okay, so it's a little backwards because I've already went here, but I'm taking you backwards to this. I'm just going to put a note on here like this also. I'll say like this, that allows you to know what happened, and I'm just going to put later. Jump out here and put later. Okay. We have that taken care of, and we're going to go forward now and look at these others. This brief look at autism and stuff. And so I'm debating on how much of this to give you, and maybe this, maybe I should give you this one also for your files. This here, chapter 10.3 on environmental factors that research has, and that's a very slow part. But let me give you this for your page and for the notes. And it's chapter 10 factors. Point 3. So I want them both on your web page and on your thing. Age of parents, exposure to air pollution, diabetes, premature birth, oxygen deprivation. Very wide swing, and it's very not documented very well. It's still very unclear where that comes from. Here's the one on autism, and here's recommendations. So I'm giving this to you here, where you address those in the same way with here. We're on about number 5 here. I'll make this all number 5, where you address these things. And I'll give you, there's some hints here, but let's, recommendation strategies for autism. And then learning disabilities also, characteristics of them. I link that here. So here's the characteristic of autism, including a video that looks like this. I've linked it in here, and the one on learning disabilities from down here also are very, very good signs of it. Again, I'm debating what to do with this. I think I'm just going to clip this also and ask you to do 2 things, like I've been, as saying, why don't you put this in your notes so it's part of this study, as well as on your web page, so you have it. Again, so I say when our time is together is done, you have some stuff, and I'm going to say signs, LD, the acronym that we all know. And again, it's here. Have trouble learning the alphabet, rhyming words, connecting, many mistakes in reading aloud. Again, this isn't new to you, but you have this now. And that's what you'll do with that. And then here, tips for teachers and parents. I'm going to clip that. And I'm going to call it tips for teachers. You don't need this on in the notes, but LD tips for teachers and parents. And I want to see that on your website, so you have a thing. Learn about this disability, observe the child playing, recognize the child's strengths and weaknesses, all that. And then this is the cognitive or intellectual disabilities, formerly known as, I just about said it, MR. And again, is with presentism that we have today, that we apply today's cultural norms to yesteryear. So as I've said before, if you say the word that goes with the letters MR, people will light their hair on fire and go crazy. And I don't want you to have trouble with that. So cognitive disabilities and what they are and implications. And so tip for parents, I'm going to clip this also. And I'm going to say it is, because this is about working with parents, I'm going to say Chapter 10, Cognitive Disabilities, Tips for Parents. And can you please put this on in your notes and on your web page here. And we're down here under cognitive disabilities. And then students gifted and talented. Let's take a look at that. Implications of disciplining on learning, gifted and talented. Maybe I have that wrong there. Oh, I do. Yeah, okay, implications, that's there. Here it talks about this, what the implications are. And then students who are gifted and talented. What do we need to know about that? I'm not going to go on this, but you write a quick summary of this. 95-561 states that agencies, financial incentives identify and educate students that are gifted and talented in this. So you study that. Now, here's these are some tips that I'm debating whether to take them out. But here is just some of those things of kids with these. With autism, has communication problems, relating to people and objectives, unusual play with toys and others, difficulty in changing routine, repetitive body movements are behavior patterns. And we don't talk about that a lot because on the spectrum, a lot of our people are way on the mild side. This repetitive doesn't show up, but more on the other side of more severe is much more repetitive. And then learning disabilities that typical developing in every other way except learning, an intra-divisional differences deviates from the norm of the child's group in learning, recognizing the child enters school, specific learning tasks, even though they were normal and everything else. So that runs the gamut there of what those are. And like I say, I'm not sure if I'll take these out and let you do these or what, but you don't have to do anything if I leave those in. Okay, so let's look at the Child Find project. Oh, it's going to jump to this, the resources. Let me look at this. Well, so let's look at this, resources for family of children with special needs, and just some information here. I won't have you do a lot with this, just read through this, but let's move down here to the Child Find project. And we don't talk a lot about that, but it'll fall within the realm of your responsibility, especially if you're early childhood educator, which some of you will be. concerns about reaching parents and their children with disabilities result in the federal funding of child find. And again, it goes back to what I talked a little bit before, that it really comes down to the communities where people live below the poverty line and they don't reach out, so you reach out. And the whole idea is to locate children with disabilities using these methods available. So this is it. It's all about this, to locate children with disabilities, and that's in the test, is what is the idea of this. And I'm going to clip this here, and again, you're going to get sick of hearing this, but I would ask you to put this in your notes right here. I'm going to say chapter 10 and put it on your web page so that you have it. And here's referral, assessment, classification, the IP, then you place them and you evaluate just like we do in school, but in a different way. And so you'll have all this, and I'm going to ask you to put it in your notes, put it in also in on your web page under here, right here. And I forget how far we are here. We're going to call this number 6, even though I think we're off a little bit. Number 6, you're going to put that clip in there and put it on your web page. And now I'm just going to give you these, like an evaluation part of it. It gives you here, and it talks about reaching these infants and toddlers with disabilities. And then this part C, again, you don't need all of this. Identifying the infant and toddler with disability, it talks about how to do that. Then this IFSP, which is Individualized Family Service Plan. As you know, in our world, we talk about the IEP, but this is the IFSP. It's a service plan because when you work with this age 0 to 3, you're working with family way more than the child. Like, how do you provide special ed services to a newborn or a real young child? Well, you don't. That plan is really for parents. So that hence the family, and that can have, as you know, we talked about earlier in this in our study, is the term family is completely different because you could be working with the matriarch, a grandmother, even great-grandmother, that the mother may or may not be part of this. So it doesn't matter. It's not up to you to decide. And then what are those procedural rights of these toddlers? And then children. And this is on the test that up to 10%, Head Start initiated the same. It requires 10% of their enrollment kids to fall into this. It's mandated. So don't miss that on the test. And you want that in here. Here's the thing for parents. And you do with this what you want. But what I'm going to do with this for number 7 is just give one line about each of these based on this, and you can clip and add or whatever you want to do on this. And that'll be the part on Child Find Project and these early ones. Okay, let's move on here and see what else we have. This inclusive family partnerships. And I think that's where this is. Comes down like this. The PTA meetings, reverse volunteer groups, special highlights. Last chapter we talked about volunteer committee membership, workshops, and seminars. And I'm not sure what else to have you do from here. Encourage play, read, families assisting at home. What can parents do? And maybe we ought to do this a little. Inclusive family involvement. Here's this here from that. Not sure what to say. Make sure you read this, though, because the test covers all this. How students can support children's homework. Let's do that. Let me clip this for your notes also, and your web page is Tips for Digital Lessons, Chapter 10. Chapter 10 for lessons. Okay. And you put that on there. A few things to remember. Encourage response. So maybe this is good here for you. I'm going to clip this again, and that you have another source here. And can you put this? we call this? A few things to remember. Okay, and you'll get that in there, and this is pretty good as far as encourage the correct response, formal assessment. Learning occurs more when other channels are learning this. So, and again, you might use that as something for parents that you make available to parents. And then the importance of communication in families and professionals. Ways to reach parents. And I want you to have this. You are going to make a list of this on your webpage. I don't have that here. But I'm going to ask you to do this. And I think what I'm going to do is just back up here and make this number 8 here is to put this on yours, ways to reach parents. You just list them here, but I also want to see them on your web page, because that'll be important for you also, like a daily log or newsletter, because we have this all digital now. Facebook, Twitter, you'd have to do a little training how to use that, but it can be done. And this I want you to have also, that doesn't take this, but families' reaction to disabilities. I'm going to make a page for that, because I think you'll be missing that if you ever have to go through this. I'm going to just put that in here, because you're going to miss out if you ever have to deal with this. Their initial response, and then here's this. So I'm going to just bring these in and ask you to write about these also, because this is important. If you have, especially, you can't imagine what this is like when you first find out that you have somebody that has a disability. So the first response is denial, and I'm going to ask you to deal with these. So first is denial, and then is your projection of blame. They say it's really similar to the stages of death when you find out somebody's going to die, but you want to project blame as somebody else's fault. And then fear, because you got to remember, we all have this perception of the perfect child in their future, and you find out they have a disability. And then fear, and then guilt. And I want you, and I'll stop talking here until I get these on here. Grief, withdrawal, and if you ever go through this with a family, you'll never forget it. And then rejection, and then the last one, finally, acceptance. And I'm going to slide that up a little bit and maybe shrink those just a little. And so this will be here. I'm going to make this number 9. I have that. Number 9 here is you address each of those very briefly for your, but you make a link on your page, and even if you can find a video about it or something like that with that, but I want to see this also on your web page, because it's a crucial part of you being a teacher, is being able to understand these. Okay. Reaching out with programs, they have this, and students speak out, and parents' reflections. Here's a father, and again, a good read. And then caring for families with children with disabilities is really can be interesting also. comes into this. There's some burnout, depression and suicide, those types of things that come into play. And then, of course, something very, very close to Dr. Rojas' heart is this culturally and linguistic diverse families. And you have to understand these terms, the overrepresented and underrepresented in the gifted talent. So her contention, as usual, is that people of different cultures are overrepresented in special ed and under in the gifted and talent programs. And then this is her acronym for culturally and linguistic diverse. School system is very overwhelming, as many have negative experiences that are not familiar with the system. When a child with special needs is involved, the situation may often become more distressing, as you can imagine. The only way they can do this. So teachers complain of the CDL parents are not involved in education. That really makes it hard. And often parents feel disrespected because of that and belittled in the meetings they attend. That's hard to hear. I'm not sure I've ever witnessed that. But also, these outcomes do not consider the cultural values of the family. Thus, children suffer cultural and language loss. And this is, again, where Dr. Rojas and I part ways, because I'm not sure it's responsibility of school to ensure and support cultural and language things, especially language that their language is. That's completely a paradigm shift. Also, so maybe that you go with Dr. Rojas on this, and you make sure kids keep their language of their native countries. I disagree with her on that, but that's her contention here, and she is the author of this textbook, so she gets to. Allows educators and parents to share information and cultural values and beliefs, promote effective communication and collaboration. This is interesting too. Becoming linguistically competent for teachers helps increase that communication, break down barriers. So you may need to learn these other cultural languages so that you can help with that. And then this is what is here also is these perceptions here, and I'm going to ask you to go with her on this for number 10. And she lays them out for you right here. And there you have it. So chapter 10 on working with folks of special needs, supporting families of special needs.